Hello and welcome to this special Headlines Today broadcast on the occasion of World Diabetes Day. Now, how often have we looked at diabetes just as the way we would look at any other medical ailment, instead of realizing that controlling diabetes is also about controlling your diet and your lifestyle? Over the next 30 minutes in this broadcast, we'll be talking to 5 experts, the best in the business, on how exactly this can be done, where the focus is going to be on the diabetic and not just on diabetes. Let me introduce my panel. To my left is Mr. Gagan Bhalla, who is the CEO of Apollo Sugar. To his left is Dr. Jayashree Gopal, endocrinologist, Apollo Sugar from Chennai. To her left is Dr. P. Srinivas, podiatrist and vascular surgeon, Apollo Sugar from Hyderabad. To my extreme right is Dr. Tirkantha Chaudhary, senior endocrinologist and diabetologist from Kolkata Apollo Sugar. And finally, Dr. Priyanka Rohtagi, chief dietitian, Apollo Sugar from Bangalore. Mr. Bhalla, if I may start with you. Now, I would want you to put it in perspective. How does a viewer, how does a citizen actually know that he is suffering from diabetes? I may say, no diabetes history in my family. Am I still at risk?
I think you potentially could be at risk, Sudhir, because I think diabetes is not really just a disease, it's a disorder. It's a lifestyle issue. So people who may feel that they're generally healthy, they should still get themselves tested and screened for diabetes, because depending on your lifestyle, your sleep, your stress levels, people can still have high blood glucose levels and be diabetic and not know that they're diabetic.
Right. Since we are talking about diet and lifestyle, and that's also the theme of World Diabetes Day, now how many of us would you say are at risk, especially in the urban centers of India?
The numbers are fairly staggering, Sudhir. If you look at urban India, I would say that roughly 1 in 6 to 1 in 8 people in urban India are diabetic, and half of them may not know that they're diabetic. So, if you're sitting at home with your friends, family for dinner, and you look around the table, out of the 6 to 7 people sitting around you,
1 out of 6 here is a diabetic.
1 out of 6 of us could be a diabetic, yes, and not know that we're diabetic.
Okay, and so you would talk about the testing, which is extremely important. We will come to that. Dr. Jayashree Gopal, what would be really the symptoms? I mean, how does a person realize that he or she could be suffering from diabetes and he or she needs to go for checking?
See, the most important thing that people need to realize is that the commonest symptom in diabetes is no symptoms. So most people who are diagnosed with diabetes do not have any symptoms. And there are 2 reasons for this. One is that only when the sugars start going above 400 or 500, you really start getting the so-called classical symptoms, excessive thirst, passing urine frequently, and so on and so forth. The second is that the sugar levels have been going up for a number of years. Let's say it's gone from, say, 100 this year to 150 next year. Your body has gotten time to get used to the sugars, so you don't really mount the symptoms as well. So again, it comes back to the point that every single person in this country should be screened at least annually. It's a simple enough test. You just go to your doctor or any clinic which is offering it, just get a random blood sugar done. If it is above 140, you have to be tested properly.
Right. So you are saying that there could be absolutely no symptoms?
Absolutely. No symptoms at all, and that is the commonest symptom.
Most often we believe that diabetes hits patients above the age of 40. Dr. Chaudhary, would you say that early detection in that sense becomes extremely critical?
I think we all know now very well that if you diagnose diabetes early and if you treat them early, then you can keep the patient well. So it is very important. But I would just say about another symptom when we are talking, that we talk about the physical symptoms and no symptoms. We have not discussed the psychological symptoms. Right. I think it is very important to understand that the moment a man in productive year or a woman in productive year develops diabetes, we do not address in common way the psychological aspect of it.
When you say psychological aspects, what exactly?
They get very depressed. A lot of anxiety plays a part.
So that's a symptom.
And that is a very important symptom. We need to address in a holistic manner. It is a multi-system disorder, and we need a multi-system answer. When a patient is diagnosed very early, you remember that he may be the breadwinner of the family.
You mentioned a very important point, Dr. Chaudhary. I may come back to you, Dr. Gopal. He said depressed. Now, anxiety. People may associate that with some other issues they may be having either within home or at the workplace. How often is it correlated to diabetes by patients?
I think it's more to do with you become anxious and depressed after you've been diagnosed with the diabetes. Not so much that you're running into the other aspect to it is that a lot of people under stress may go on to develop diabetes because of, not directly because of the stress, but because the stress causes them to lead a poor lifestyle. So they're not sleeping well, they're not eating well, they gain weight, and so they develop diabetes. So indirectly, stress causes diabetes.
So again, we're coming back to the same issue of lifestyle, of not following the right lifestyle. Dr. Chaudhary, today being World Diabetes Day, what exactly would you tell the people of this country? Because there's as he said, 1 in every 6 or 8 would actually be a diabetic. What is the one important thing that you would want people to do today?
I think one of the most important thing is we have got a tiger on the tail. What I'm trying to say is that while modernism has come, we have had many luxuries and things that we are doing. But we have somehow put something in backseat. Exercise and our diet habit. Our body is programmed for a particular amount of calorie requirement and particular amount of exercise that is as good as breathing and heart rate. So what we are not doing at the moment is a good lifestyle. We are having a sedentary lifestyle and we eat much more calories than what we need. And this is reflecting right at the beginning. We are getting childhood obesity, which is a very, very big problem.
So a child who is obese has more chances of being a diabetic?
Absolutely. They not only have more chance of diabetes, I think he's looking at a morbidity in terms of cardiovascular, diabetic, and many, many things. I think it's very important that we understand that longer the diabetes is there, more is the complication. So if we try to prevent, postpone, detect early diabetes, and as a multi-system approach, I think what will happen is that we'll push the diabetes further. And once they are detected, if we manage them properly, then complications will come later. Yeah. And if the complications come later...
I think if I can add Sudhir to Dr. Chaudhary's point, I think what is happening is because of poor lifestyle choices, lack of exercise, lack of fitness regimes, diet control, diabetes is getting younger and faster. Yes. So we're seeing a lot more younger people, and the doctors out here can comment more than I can, that they're seeing a lot more younger people out there who are diabetic. Okay. And I think in some sense the one message I'd like to add, which is beyond the screening message that Dr. Jayashree covered, is really education. We need to start in the community. We need to educate our kids. We need to educate our family members about the risks of diabetes. It's not just a sort of scary word. It's a lifestyle choice. Right. So you can actually address it.
But the fact that you say that diabetes is a young disease now, I mean that
younger
itself,
and faster.
Yeah, that itself is a very scary thought. Dr. Srinivas, one of the things that is obviously associated with diabetes is also the tendency to develop foot and nervous problems. Now, how serious is that threat and how does it really manifest itself?
Basically, these are part of complications, like he said. If you manage the diabetes, catch the diabetes early on, make the diagnosis early on, and then manage them well, they wouldn't land up in a situation like this. This basically, sometimes it could be a presenting feature, like somebody has tingling and numbness in both the hands and the feet, and then they have burning kind of sensation in the hands and the feet. That could be the presenting symptom of diabetes sometimes. And this basically says that it's due to the effects of the blood sugar on the nerves. And that's the initial stage, which is called symptomatic neuropathy. After which what happens is the symptoms die down and the feet become numb. So that goes on to something more dangerous.
And a significant number of patients who are diagnosed with diabetes actually have this kind of...
almost 15% of them, if you take about 100 diabetics, about 15 of them do have some kind of neuropathy or foot issues.
And that could lead to further complications.
That could lead to further complications.
And to add to Dr. Srinivas's point, India is somewhat unique and somewhat disadvantaged because what happens in India, the cost of late diagnosis actually has a major impact on the family. So numbers show that the average Indian in urban India who's diabetic spends around 30,000 rupees a year, which is not a chump change, right? It's a decent amount of money.
Someone who is diagnosed with diabetes spends 30,000 rupees in a year, you say?
To manage their diabetes across the year.
Okay.
But the cost of late diagnosis, to Dr. Srinivas's point, for somebody who's been, let's say, diabetic for 10 years and has not known that, that cost is 20 times that number. Okay. So, when you start looking at 6 lakhs, 7 lakhs to spend, that is a decent amount of money which can impact your family's income, your lifestyle. So it's not just,
apart from the fact that the medical ailment is also that much more serious.
Is that much more serious and getting worse. So you're going to have issues with your foot, you're going to have issues with cardiac problems, you're going to have issues with retinopathy in the eye.
Right.
So those problems and financial makes it much worse.
So the first message that we're getting from our panel is that early detection is going to be extremely critical, and that's going to be one of the big messages. The moment you say diabetic means you're controlling sugar. Now, is that, would you say, a slightly illiterate way of looking at it?
We can control sugar by playing around with the Indian food quite well. it is moderation which has to be looked at. It is a good combination of balanced food rather than saying completely no rice, no potato, no banana, which is quite a put off for a patient to follow.
Right.
So what we aim at in Sugar Clinic here is, we are a big healthcare. So we take this ownership in customizing each plan for each and every patient so that we can relate to the kind of food habit he has grown up with. At the same time, help him manage his sugars well and prevent the complications.
So you're saying it's not denial, but moderation, which is the key word.
Exactly.
Right?
I think restriction is the word that is the problem. I think we should not be restrictive.
As it is, Indians don't like to be restricted.
We don't want restriction. If you say somebody, say that once in 15, 20 days, please go out whatever you want and eat whatever you want, but in moderation. And if the patient is educated to know what is a diabetic healthy diet and lifestyle is, I think that makes sense in most of the situations.
Is there a difference in approach of a patient who has been diagnosed after many years, a late diagnosis, or a person who has been diagnosed very early, say in his early 20s? Is there a difference in the way he or she approaches his or her problem?
Attitude towards the disease management differs to some extent, and people who have been diagnosed at a later stage have been somehow managing or maybe in a denial mode and were trying to manage it through some remedies like Karela juice or fenugreek seeds, which are not the real time-tested kind of remedies. They don't check their sugars very well, so they'll end up in complications more often. Our approach to such people is to make them understand how this has impacted them, what monitoring would help them in understanding how well they are under control. So, and like Dr. Jayashree said, people say that we do all kinds of household work, we don't have a maid. But they need to understand that we are all into an apartment culture. So the per square feet area that we are staying in has really changed. And if we look at the generations, we are hardly walking 1,000 steps a day compared to the generations earlier which were walking 5,000 to 6,000 footsteps a day.
Right.
So we need to understand that somehow the younger generation who've caught it young have to manage it quite well, and lifestyle has been the culprit. We are getting westernized, we are doing night shifts, we are doing a lot of different things which were not there.
More of a sedentary lifestyle.
Sedentary lifestyle, a lot of change in our biological cycle, a lot of change in our eating habits. Eating out earlier was very unusual, but it has now become a weekly indulgence. So we need to understand that if we have to live with that kind of a culture, how do we make our selections? Eating on the right timings, eating the right kind of combinations, eating a good combination of carbohydrate with proteins, so that you balance out the glycemic index of your meal.
One of the things that Dr. Priyanka mentioned was people going for different kind of solutions, drinking Karela juice, etc., which may not really be the way to fight diabetes.
Right.
Now, when people come to you at Apollo Sugar, is that also to kind of convince them that, sorry, that's not the way to fight diabetes and we will tell you the right way to fight diabetes? Is that the way it is?
No, so see, we basically try and do two things. We are trying to take a multidisciplinary care team approach, what Dr. Tirthankar called a multi-systems approach, right? And what we want to do is we want to blend the best of Western medicine and Indian knowledge. So for example, there are studies which show that yoga can actually help stress levels, and stress level reduction can help with diabetes management. So we would encourage something like that. So that, we're trying to take a multi-system.
How many of your patients actually take to yoga almost immediately? Does it happen?
Not immediately, right? This takes persistence, to Dr. Jayashree's point, that, if you try and stay with them, remind them, stay with them every 6 months, every 3 months.
So that helps.
That helps.
Yeah.
So I think that's one part. The other is we are really strong believers in customization. So Dr. Rothagi mentioned earlier about customized diet charts, right? What may work for you as a diabetic versus what works for me as a diabetic may be very different. Not just in our diet, but in our lifestyle. We do different jobs, right? We do different kinds of exercises and so on. So we try and build a customized care plan for our patient so that they have a very clear understanding of what do they need to do on a daily basis to manage it. And it may include Karela juice and fenugreek, or it may not.
Okay.
But it depends on the person.
Right. Are there any kind of professions which are more susceptible to diabetes, or it will essentially depend on the lifestyle?
It depends on the lifestyle. Any profession where
an IT professional who spends say about 10 hours in front of a computer, more of a sedentary lifestyle,
that's what I'm saying, sir. Any sedentary lifestyle is going to be a risk factor. So because the IT profession lends itself to that type of sitting and for long periods of time without moving, but any person in a managerial job, for example, would be at risk. So it just comes down to the number of steps you're taking in a day. So that's why I said, I think everybody should be screened. We have, just to make a point regarding children with diabetes, what happens is a lot of times children get diagnosed with diabetes, just before their 10th or the 12th standard public exams because of a combination of the stress. They've gained weight in the previous year because they've been studying a lot and they've not had time to exercise. And coming up to the exam, invariably, January of every year, we get, I'm sure Dr. Titankar will agree, we land up with children as young as 13, 15, 17 with diabetes. Again, just to do with the fact that they've been sitting and studying and not doing anything else. Right. So we can't say that this particular profession is more at risk. Anybody is at risk.
Right. When you speak of obese kids, are they also at risk with the, especially, and you need to advise them, especially on the kind of footwear, etc. to wear? Does that happen even with the younger generation?
Yes, yes. Definitely the obesity has a role. Like Dr. Chaudhary was saying, it's part of the metabolic syndrome, and these young kids who are obese have a much higher risk of developing diabetes in their elder lives. And yeah, with regards to the incidence of foot problems, yeah, obesity in itself can increase the foot pressure and can in itself lead to problems in the feet. And when diabetes sets in, it gets compounded.
Okay. Talking especially about nutrition, when patients come in, do you advise them that this is the kind of diet, or again a healthy diet is
we try and understand how they have been eating and where all they have gone wrong. If they have a recent weight gain, where have they gone wrong, and then try and customize it to their food habit. It would be virtually impossible to put them on a plan which they cannot relate to, so they would not comply to it. So we try and understand what they have been eating, where they have gone wrong, and make the small modifications there and sustain there.
Right.
And make them understand one important thing is obesity doesn't run in the family. It's because nobody runs in the family, that's why you have obesity.
Yeah. Now, talking specifically about the kind of initiatives that you have been taking at Apollo Sugar, how big a challenge has it been? Because as you said, if 1 in every 6 Indians is at risk of suffering from diabetes, it's a huge challenge for you to surmount. How does it really work on the ground?
One, we are trying to work as hard as we can to help the people out there, get screened, because screening is important. It's one of the first things to know whether you're diabetic. Now, in terms of what Apollo Sugar itself is doing, we are trying to essentially achieve 3 things when we go out in the marketplace. We first want to have convenient and world-class care accessible. So we are trying to set up clinics in neighborhoods so that people don't have to go to a multi-specialty tertiary care facility, go 2 hours, drive there, find parking, and so on. You should be able to access world-class diabetic care in your neighborhood. So that's one of the first things we're trying to do. And we've been welcomed by the communities out there. Wherever we've tried to set up a Apollo Sugar clinic, we've had community outreach efforts with RWAs, we work with mosques, we work with gurudwaras, we work with schools.
So do these communities realize that it's almost like a war against diabetes?
Yeah.
They do realize that.
And we've started calling this a disease-free diabetic nation. And that's the way we are trying to approach this, because India has a large problem of diabetes and lifestyle management issues.
Is there a target here by which you hope to have a diabetes-free India?
So we are trying to work very hard to say by 2030, which is many years out there, but we think we should be able to help the country be able to live a disease-free diabetic lifestyle. We'll not.
Okay, disease-free diabetic lifestyle is what you're looking at.
Correct.
Okay.
So one of the things, that is one thing, right? That's around neighborhood clinics. Second, I think we have a very strong clinical excellence agenda. Everything that we do, we want to have the best quality talent, whether it's our endocrinologists, diabetologists, dietitians, diabetic nurses, education and counselors and so on. We're trying to work very hard to say, bring the best clinical excellence agenda to every sugar clinic.
Right. You mentioned a disease-free diabetic India. Lifestyle.
Yeah.
Tell us something about the dangers which actually stare us in your face, the way the diabetes is.
If one doesn't manage his diabetes well on, and that too early on, they lead to these complications which can be right from sudden onset to blindness to even losing a limb or getting a limb amputated. And the risk that scares of an amputation is 1 in 20 seconds world across a diabetic loses a limb. Okay. Every 20 seconds a person is losing his limb to diabetes. He's getting amputated, which is a very high risk.
It's a high risk.
And it could be prevented if you go on an orderly fashion, if you get your foot screened early on.
Right. And that's why, Sudhir, if I can add to Dr. Srinivas's point, we have a very strong lifestyle management agenda, and we work very hard with our customers to be able to support them inside the clinic and outside the clinic. So through call centers, through technology is a great enabler, things like mobile apps and things like that. working with them on patient education, working with them on being able to do constant or periodic follow-ups to make sure that they are actually measuring their blood glucose levels. They're following their customized diet charts that Dr. Rotagi and team develop.
Right.
It is important to help people follow a appropriate lifestyle.
So on World Diabetes Day, what would you want them to take care, especially from the point of view of diet and nutrition? Is there something very specific? They can continue their life eating ice cream and sweets and yet be disciplined with regard to other diet.
I'd like to say 5 key messages. Have a lot of positivity in yourself. Manage your weight regularly. Go for a regular weight check. Go for your sugar checks regularly. Portion control is very important. Change most of your grains to whole grains. Eat your fruit rather than drinking your fruit. So have fruits rather than juices. Include a lot of seasonal fruits, vegetables in your diet. Stay away from processed foods as far as possible. And diabetes is not contagious. So spread happiness, be happy, and be a stressful population.
So the message from the doctors is that don't follow a sedentary lifestyle, follow the right diet, go for early checkups, because early checkup will actually ensure that if you're suffering from diabetes, the chances of recovery are that much more. We do hope that you found this special broadcast on World Diabetes Day useful.